What is up, everyone? It is another Sunday. It is another random comic books review. It is cold as balls. Hopefully you got your coffee and you're keeping warm with me. I am your host, Corey James, if you didn't know that already. If you're on the Suicide Moses Productions channel, make sure you click the subscribe button, like it, share it, tell your friends about it. We've got tons of different shows that go up on here all the time. But today, let's just dive right in. We're going to be talking about the X-Men Onslaught saga. So what is the Onslaught saga? Okay, so this was a little bit far into the Uncanny X-Men series, a little bit farther than I went when I was younger. I kind of fell off around 94. I took a little break from comic books for a while, which I shouldn't have, because there was a lot of good stories. And Onslaught was always one that I had heard about, but I didn't know much about. So I wanted to check it out. I did get a chance to check it out. It was on Comixology for borrow, so I borrowed the whole series, and I've been reading it for the past few weeks. It's really long. So if you want a good long X-Men read in the balls deep heart of what we love about Uncanny X-Men, this is a good series for you, and it's readily available for digital or whatever. I'm sure you could probably find the volumes online. I don't see why not. So what is Onslaught? Onslaught first appeared in the Fatal Attraction storyline in 1993, where the X-Men were facing off against Magneto once again, and Magneto was winning. Magneto was about to kill the X-Men. So Professor Xavier made a decision that he had never made before, and he shut down Magneto's brain. Now, the cool thing about this is, like, Professor Xavier is always struggling back and forth with decisions that he has to make. Being the strongest psychic in the entire world, the most powerful psychic in the entire world, he could do a lot of things that aren't morally good, but he makes the right decisions usually. But with the world getting worse and worse, no matter what he tries and no matter what he does and no matter what the X-Men attempt to do to make things better, it never does. So it's constantly in his mind battling back and forth, like, is he doing the right thing? Should he just do what Magneto says and just take out the humans, But anyway, so he shuts down Magneto's brain, and then he's struggling with the fact that he did this for a while. And so in 1996, Uncanny X-Men X-Men Volume 2, issue number 53. Scott Lobdell, Mark Waid, and Andy Kubert were the creators and artists on these books, decided that shit was going down in the world. Like, stuff's getting way worse with mutants. They're about to elect Creed as the president, which, if you know the X-Men, you know that character, and that's not good for mutants. So that election's going on. Professor Xavier's struggling with that, and basically his mind snaps, and he creates, coupled with Magneto and Charles Xavier, he creates a psionic telepathic armor character around his body called Onslaught. And when they first introduce this character, they don't tell you that. You don't know that it's Professor Xavier. So it's pretty cool. Spoiler alert. It's pretty cool when you're like, why does it look like Magneto? I mean, it's got the red and purple, but it's gigantic. It's kind of like Super Shredder, but it's like Super Magneto. And I was wondering, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, it looks like Magneto. Why does it look like Magneto? And then as you go on in the story, you find out that, it's because Professor Xavier shut down Magneto's brain. They're kind of went together and created this monster. So Onslaught is just uber super over exaggerated powerful. And he likes to mess with people. Like, that's what I noticed, is in this book, he doesn't ever just take anyone down. Like, he could. He attacks the mansion multiple times and, like, just takes the X-Men out so quickly, but he never kills anyone. He'll just, like, screw with them to show them that he could kill them, and then leave. And then give them, like, a couple minutes to get their bearings together and try to get a plan to go after him. And then he just shows back up and he's like, you guys are morons. Like, I know what you're doing, and I could kill you. So it's such a weird, different villain. On top of the fact that this is their mentor. This is the person that raised them, that they've trusted the most their entire life, Charles Xavier, who's now, they're trying to figure out how to kill him. Like, so it's got this great dynamic of them constantly struggling with the fact that we have to kill the person that we care for the most. This, like I said, this was a really long running series. The cool thing that this spawned was a crossover universe for the X-Men. And I'm not sure if this was one of the first ones, but it was one of the first ones like this. As I was reading, you get through the first 4 or 5 issues of the X-Men, and then it tells you, and this, if I wasn't reading it all together as one whole, would have been really annoying to me. But it makes sense marketing wise for Marvel back then, because they're getting their readers to spread out. They're not like, they're trying to get people who like the X-Men. Oh, well, why don't you go over here and read some Fantastic Four? Oh, you don't want to? Too bad, because Onslaught, literally, the story continues in Fantastic Four. So you kind of had to, which is kind of what they were doing with the X-Men Black that we had talked about last week with the Apocalypse. Like, oh, you want the Apocalypse story? Well, then you got to read all these bullshit stories. Which, it wasn't the case with this. It was actually pretty cool. It continued in Fantastic Four, where it's following Reed Richard and Sue's son, who is supposedly, like, going to be even more powerful than Charles Xavier when he grows up. So Onslaught's kind of like interested in him and trying to manipulate him into helping him as a child. So he's like making himself look like a little kid so that he's not afraid. So that was cool. And having it in the Fantastic Four, you get a different style of artwork. You're getting a different writer. You're getting a different style. So you just went from that X-Men, which we all know what that artwork looked like in 1996. So, like, the next issue you read is Fantastic Four, so it looks completely different. It's got a completely different style because it's a completely different artist. So it was pretty cool to see, a little refreshing. And then you see those characters that were in X-Men in the Fantastic Four issues. So you get to see, like, Gambit hanging out with, the Thing, which is weird and cool. And the artwork, I mean, like, picture the Fantastic Four's artwork and then try to picture Gambit or any of the X-Men, Wolverine, drawn in that style. It's weird, but it was cool, I'll admit. And then it went back to the X-Men issue for like 1 or 2 issues, I think. And then it switched to the Uncanny X-Men issues, which I don't know why. I mean, they're basically the same thing. And then it switched to a couple of, the last issues were Cable issues, because of course Cable got pulled into there. X-Man was a huge character in all of this. He was the one trying to warn everybody about Onslaught. It's funny because, like, X-Man is a character in there, Cable is a big character in there, and, like, technically they're all the same person. They're from just different realities and different timelines. It's a whole mess. But then towards the end of the Onslaught series, you start seeing this temple and this guy who's been living in this temple for decades, who worships someone. And of course, he says it's time for him to awaken, and it's Apocalypse. He's always there. Like, Apocalypse is always behind everything. And no, once Apocalypse wakes up and you find out he's not actually behind it, like, this is Charles Xavier, he is Onslaught, this is happening, and has nothing to do with Apocalypse, but Apocalypse knows that it's happening, and basically says, like, this is it. This is the end of the era. Like, this is the end of the humans, and this is where we will take over the world. But he doesn't have to do anything. He just gets to, like, hang back in his lair and watch everything happen, which is kind of cool. I said, Apocalypse is one of the greatest villains ever because he's not always in the picture. He's not always just full frontal. I mean, he has tried a few times to just go balls to the wall and take down the world, and he's failed. So like, in different stories, he has to be a little bit more tactical about it and kind of hang back or go off and do his own thing and try to stir some shit up over here while this stuff's going down. And once he sees that Onslaught's so powerful and actually can take down the X-Men like that, he gets excited. It's weird. So yeah, I'm not gonna tell you the ending because I usually do, and I feel like this story was probably one of my favorite new, like, it's not new, but it's new to me. It was an amazing experience to go back and read a saga of a villain that I had heard of, but I didn't know much about. I'd like you to do that. Like, I'd like you to experience that too. I gave you a good bit away, but I didn't give you the whole thing. There's a lot there that I didn't tell you. So, if you get a chance, I mean, download the Comixology app. It's you can get a 30-day trial for free. I mean, why not? And they have tons of books on there that you can just borrow for free. And the entire Onslaught saga is on there. So if you get a chance, check that out. Will we ever see Onslaught on the big screen? Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty far down the road. There's so many other villains that happened before Onslaught that will probably make it to the screen before that. And with the Dark Phoenix being basically the last movie in the Fox franchise X-Men universe, we're probably gonna restart anyways in the MCU. So I doubt we'll ever see Onslaught. So the best you're gonna get is the best that we have. It's the Onslaught saga in the comic books, and the artwork's amazing. The character's cool. It's different. It just adds on to the Charles Xavier not being as perfect as everybody thinks he is, because there's tons of different times where he's effed up. Also, one little tidbit at the beginning of this story, I'm thinking this might be the first time that we've heard that Professor Xavier was in love with Jean Grey. I've heard that before in other stories, but later ones, like in newer comic books in the 2000s. And I always thought that was weird, like that he never told anyone. It was just something that was in his head that maybe Jean heard or something. And when I was reading the Onslaught, that was one of the first things that was told to her by Onslaught in like the first issue. Was he shows her when, a memory of his where he's thinking that, but he could never tell her, and it like freaks her out because that's her mentor. He like raised her. It's kind of weird, but just something little and weird that I was like, whoa, I think that might be the first time that happened in the comic books. So yeah, check out the Onslaught X-Men saga. Like I said, I'm sure you could go online and find the volumes. They're probably pretty cheap at this point. I mean, it was 1996. It wasn't a booming era for comic books. Like we still had a good 10 years before comic books would come back. And digital is always convenient. Check out Comixology and all the issues on there. So yeah, this was a random comic book review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're on the Suicide Moses Productions channel, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Tell your friends about it. Check out my new series that I have on here, Bands You May Not Know. The first episode is up. I talked about Bill Murray, so check that one out. And I'm actually going to be working on episode 2 here in about 5 seconds, where I'm going to be talking about Set to Stun. So, check out all those new shows. Thanks for watching. Have a great Sunday and a good rest of the week.